Erik McKinney here with Darrell Rideaux. And Darrell, we're going to talk USC 31, Arizona State 26. Boy, after the first quarter, it didn't feel like we were going to say that was the final score. USC starts out just on fire. They score 28 points in the first quarter. Kedon Slovis almost throws for 300 yards in that first quarter alone, 4 touchdowns. And then USC hit the skids a little bit. They scored 3 points over the final 3 quarters of that game. Arizona State finishes the game on a 19-3 run, cuts it. Arizona State has a chance at the end to win the game. USC ends up holding on. Your big takeaways from this game?
I mean, with all the distractions amidst the hiring of a new athletic director in Mike Boone, and he basically goes out and challenges Clay Helton to finish the season out strong and compete. You would think that the timing of being on the road was great. And by the way that the first quarter started, Erik, and Kedon Slovis's homecoming, being that he's back in his home state, starting like you talked about, 15 of 17 for 293 yards, 4 touchdowns. The offense looked virtually unstoppable. But like you said, it's a 4-quarter game, and USC has yet to put together 4 complete games. And for one reason or another, the second quarter continues to rear its ugly head. If it wasn't for, the special teams mishaps, something that they have to correct on kickoff return, and a bunch of penalties that just kind of took the air out of USC's offensive rhythm, that 28-point lead started to dwindle, and it felt like they held on for dear life, only putting up those 3 points afterwards.
Yeah, once they get up 28-7, you had a Kedon Slovis interception on a decision where he's throwing it up into double coverage. Maybe not a good decision, definitely not a good throw. That gets intercepted. True freshman Keenan Christon fumbles. Arizona State all year has forced and recovered fumbles. You kind of expected something like that to happen at some point. Did not happen at a great time. False starts constantly. Special teams, a week after giving up a 100-yard return for a touchdown, they give up a 97-yard return that sets up a short touchdown. They gave up a few big kick returns, and really Arizona State did not move the ball all that well in terms of total yards. Under 50, less than 50 rushing yards for a team that has Benjamin back there. USC they played well in spurts in all different areas. Again, special teams had so many miscues, but there in that fourth quarter, you get that phenomenal punt from Ben Griffiths to down it at the 1-yard line. Amon-Ra St. Brown has a nice punt return to kind of keep field position there, making Arizona State go all 90 yards to get that game-winning touchdown. And Christian Rector makes a huge play. The game-winning play to bat a ball in the air and make a really nice interception, diving for a guy that big to do that. And the disappointment for me in this game is that we're going to talk about issues plaguing USC right now. But you're going to lose the fact that you had Michael Pittman, you had Amon-Ra St. Brown, you had guys in this game, Drake London, making special plays with unbelievable numbers that they put up. I mean, Kedon Slovis throws for 432 yards, 4 touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 receptions, 173 yards, a 95-yard touchdown reception. Michael Pittman kind of came up big throughout the entire game, 13 receptions, 146 yards. Keenan Christon had a 58-yard touchdown reception, 2 touchdown receptions. Drake London, a touchdown reception of an unbelievable catch where he goes up high on 3rd down to take a ball away from a defender.
Snatched it. That was a grown man play.
Set up a field goal there when USC just desperately needed points. So you had guys making plays. Isaiah Pola-Mao with an interception back home in Arizona. But again, like you mentioned, what stands out, I guess, for me is Mike Bohn on Thursday. Good programs finish strong. And I know he's talking about the season, specifically talking about the season. But you've got to talk about that in terms of each game. How does this team finish games? They did not finish this game strong. Just like Oregon, you get up 10-0 and the wheels come off. The wheels didn't quite come off as much here. What did you see in terms of the changes? What happened? Offense, defense, special teams, the whole kind of program. What happened to change for Arizona to go on that run?
I mean, boy, I was listening to the telecast, and the announcers mentioned a conversation that they had with Herm Edwards, the head coach in that CEO role that virtually Clay Helton is in at USC, being that there's two coordinators and he's overseeing the program. Me and Herm Edwards expected USC to get out fast, and he kind of warned his team that, look, we're going to have our opportunities to get back into this game, so just weather the storm. And sure enough, when USC goes off script, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing a team that's inefficient when it comes to being balanced on offense, regardless of what the personnel may be. It just seems like USC is having a very challenging time, Erik, controlling tempo, whether it's controlling the game through the air and really just kind of keeping the clock moving, or when you really need those much needed rushing yards or attempts just to kind of keep a team like Arizona State balanced and off schedule. They can't do it. And as a result of that, yeah, they got up 28 points early in the game, but come that second quarter, when the game started to come back to Arizona State, this is where we noticed all of the issues starting to rear its head week in and week out. And this USC team, for me, kind of reminds me of that movie where you see all of the blockbuster highlights in the trailers. And you saw much of that in the first quarter. But then when you get to the middle of the movie, it just kind of feels flat. And then you have to, rely on heroics and special effects to kind of cap off the game. And that's what I felt with this USC team. With the defense that's getting healthy, too many times are we finding Clancy Pendergast putting this defense in harm's way, playing zero coverage, man-to-man coverage with no high safety. And instead of giving the defense a chance and creeping the safety down low, we're seeing this team exposing itself early. And you let a young freshman quarterback out of Mission Viejo and Yellen get hot. There is no excuse for a true freshman in his first start to not have pressure in his face all day. Instead, USC starts to play this cover two shell quarters defense and allows Arizona State and Yellen to get his rhythm going. And when, for me, I thought the turning point in that game was Keaton Slovis cramping up. It felt like a cramp, I'm not sure, but a lower body injury that took him out of the game. And when Matt Fink was in, although he did a serviceable job, it just felt like this offense could not find its rhythm enough. But again, this has been USC, whether it's been on the road and their mishaps and miscues with penalties, or as of late over these last few games, it's been special teams letting them down. And that's very disappointing because you talked about so many heroic plays from key players that just go overshadowed because you kind of left this game feeling a little dejected. Yeah, it was a victory, but you felt like this should have been a more dominating performance, and it wasn't.
Yeah, you go back to the Notre Dame game, a moral victory and a loss. If you can have a moral loss and a win, that's a little bit what this game feels like, what Colorado felt like a little bit too. And again, you hate to say it because watching Christian Rector make that play, celebrate with his teammates, a senior to do that, he's been beat up all year, ankle injury, to make that play, that is a great play. To win a game. And that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about those sorts of things. And again, when you're talking about just in a 60-minute increment with this game, USC, the injuries that they're battling, that Stephen Carr and Vavai Malape, the running backs, they warmed up early, did not play. So again, they're with Keenan Kristen and Quincy Jounty at running back. And that's it. You saw a little bit from Amon-Ra St. Brown back there. But they don't have that marquee step, or even a guy like Vavai where a 3rd and 2, a 4th and 1, it becomes an easy decision to give it to them.
And it's because of that. Okay, so if we are going to talk about the highlights of this game, because there were some, I love the fact that Graham Harrell found a way to really feature Keaton Kristen's world-class speed, using him out of the backfield, and I thought he was exceptional in that role. I'd like to see him get at least 5 to 7 attempts, kind of the way that they were scripting for Stephen Carr on a per-game basis. I think he can fit very well coming out of the backfield, giving Keaton Slovis that much-needed outlet. But for me, I thought early in the game, it was the matchups with Drake London and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And when you talk about a money play late or with Keaton Slovis, 3rd and 7, backed up against your own end zone, and you throw a dime, that money ball in between two safeties. He just teases us with how good this kid is becoming with every rep. It's like he's able to process it, and he is totally taking command. And this offense at times assumes his identity. But there are other times where I think the coachings put too much on his shoulders. So again, we talk about that balance, but when you have as much talent and they have a plethora of skill players that really show up in big moments, you can't help but marvel of how good this team can be if they can just find a way to click on all cylinders and put a team like Arizona State away. You know, when you put up 28 points in the first quarter, you're teasing us with greatness. But then you come back and you remind us that this program has a long way to go. So as much as I like to give the highs, it's just the lows continue to kind of mesh in. And so it's going to be a yin and yang in this conversation with you.
Yeah, you scored 28 in the first quarter. You've got to score more than 31 at the final gun.
No doubt.
That can't be your end score. 31 points there. You got to find the end zone again. And the fact that Arizona State was able to make adjustments as the game went along. I mean, let's face it, that Arizona State defense in that first quarter, those first 4 touchdown drives, they could do nothing. There was nothing that they could do. And that is how good they looked kind of for the rest of the game in spurts. And you mentioned Keaton Slovis, the way he can throw the ball. And we saw that throw to Amon-Ra St. Brown that splits the safeties and he's off and running. We saw that during spring and fall all the time. You're kind of waiting for when that's going to happen. And I understand defenses are taking that away. And so those shots are maybe few and far between, but they got it and they took it. And that's as good as they can look on a play like that. He got saved a little bit. Against Colorado, USC got saved. They weren't able to recover a couple fumbles and make plays late. Keaton Slovis throws an interception that gets returned for a touchdown. It's called back for a good reason. That there was defensive holding on the play by the guy who made the interception, but against a receiver that he was not throwing it to. So that's a situation where you saw him kind of pat himself on the chest. That's a true freshman mistake that you're seeing as defenses kind of throw different looks at him. And like we mentioned, without those running backs there, it's on him to make so many plays. And that gets tough for him. I want to flip it over to defense. Sure. USC, again, we talked about players that they're without against Arizona State. Marlon Tuipulotu, the nose tackle, he doesn't play against Arizona State. Palaie Naoteote, the linebacker, he doesn't play in this game. So you're down a little bit up front. Drake Jackson was in. Christian Rector, as we mentioned, was in. Drake Jackson had another very good game. But I want to go into the cornerback play with you. It felt like, again, we talked about Keaton Slovis starts the game 11 for 11. Joey Yellen went 12 for 12 at one point during the game. He was able to get on a roll. And this felt like the first game where the cornerbacks in a lot of situations just got beat. What did you see from them, and why was Arizona State able to move the ball through the air, especially on a couple touchdowns that ended up being really easy throws in what looked like kind of straight man-to-man coverage on the outside?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because this was a game that would showcase the skill set of very talented corners of USC that up until now haven't given up many deep balls. But this was a game where I really truly felt like the technique failed them. It wasn't technique when I saw, and not to point him out, but he's a big boy and he would own up to it. But early in the game, that first touchdown given up, Isaac Taylor Stewart, ITS, he abandoned his technique. He's in man coverage, never got his hands on the wide receiver, and instead, from a press coverage, he backpedals and gives cushion. Instead, that's not the technique that Greg Byrne teaches. Greg Byrne teaches just more of a fundamental, pure step, which brings you to balance and forces the receiver to have to go around you and reroute himself. As a result of that, you give up that, all of a sudden, now it starts to get in your head. We started seeing these corners play with cushion. And then on the other side, you look at, as talented as Elijah Griffin is, his biggest strength is also his weakness. He plays with a lot of emotion and passion. Kind of reminds me of Jack Jones, who was on the other side, who happened to play in this game quite mature, considering he was playing up against his former team. But it's the extracurricular bravado that is unnecessary. And I really think it threw them off their game and rhythm. For one reason or another, because their technique failed them, it gave Arizona State's offense a lot of confidence. And so what happened was Clancy was forced to get out of that coverage. He started going more too high safety shells. And as a result of that, we started seeing pockets and windows that Yellen was able to find. So it kind of felt like a lot of catch and go. But in this game and in this particular defensive game plan, it seemed like this defense was committed to allowing for those little hot routes, those little swing routes out of the backfield. Not sure if they thought that that was going to beat them, but it definitely extended plays and drives. And again, we talked about USC escaping from really just, I thought that Arizona State at times imploded. A key drive late in the game, their tight end drops a key pass in the middle that probably would have put them up. And it would have been that, uh-oh, here we go moment for Clay. But instead, fortune finds that he drops the ball. And again, one or two plays later, we see Christian Rector making a great play that John Houston early in the game kind of had an opportunity, but it took a fortuitous bounce. So I'm not really sure where USC defensively will go from here, but having Talanoa Hufanga back and having Isaiah Palomo in his second game with yet again another interception leads you to believe that if you can keep those two safeties back there, it's going to shore up a lot. And again, in a game like this where we could be talking about how they kept Arizona State's running game under attack, they're just not playing in rhythm and sync. And I think it's going to take a couple more quarters for this defense to start clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, Talanoa Hufanga comes back. He forces a fumble again, involved in kind of a big play for the USC defense. And we'll wrap this up here. Just kind of final thoughts, about the game, and then spinning it forward. I thought it was interesting. Clay Helton, after the game, when asked sort of about it, he doubled down on what Mike Bohn had said. Mike Bohn, the athletic director, on Thursday, not only did he say good programs finish strong, like we mentioned, but he also said it's fight on, but it's fight on to victory. And Clay Helton made sure to say that because, yes, they won. But I don't know if this is the kind of win that he really needs at this time. When you start out like that, when you have that start and you have then sort of that collapse when all three phases are struggling at various times. And I understand the injury situation. This is not a healthy team. But Arizona State's playing without their quarterback. They sent a true freshman in there who hadn't taken a snap ever in college before. And they managed to make it work. They found a way to make it work. Didn't come up with a win. But again, the injury situation is what it is right now. I don't know if this is the response that Clay Helton wanted or needed to finish off the season. I will say USC is going to take this win and come back to Los Angeles. But you've got to go to Cal to play a very good defense. I don't know if Cal's offense can score more than 21 against anybody, but we'll get a sense of that. And then this is really shaping up, going to Cal and then UCLA, that last game. That's going to be kind of fascinating to see how that plays out. But I don't know if the question anymore is, can Clay Helton do enough to keep his job? I think the last couple weeks maybe have delivered those answers with the way USC has finished those games, talking about good programs finishing strong.
Right. But for me, Erik, for Clay Helton, I think he's auditioning for his next job, and he has one more opportunity or audition on the road to try to put together a complete game. But when you go up against an Arizona State team that ranks 10th in the Pac-12 in offensive efficiency, in particular in the red zone, and you allow for a first-time starting quarterback, true freshman, to throw for 4 touchdowns, there's something systemically wrong with the concept. And so let's see if they can actually put a complete game together. But the writing is on the wall. And I just felt like Clay Helton saying what he said at the end in his press conference was brown nosing. And my dad once told me, once you start kissing butt, you can never stop. And I think it's a little too late for him to start brown nosing. I think that he should just try to focus on putting the best product on the field and be happy with completing his chapter. But I think it is time for USC to start a new chapter in a different direction.
We'll see how things play out kind of over the next 2 weeks. But That's our look at USC escaping with a win over Arizona State, 31-26, as the Trojans become bowl eligible, get their sixth win of the season this year, which is not something that we could say about them last year. So again, they'll move on to go take on Cal next week. For Rideaux, this is Erik McKinney. WeAreSC.